Ladies and gentlemen, the long-awaited, highly anticipated session 33. It is our it's unbelievable. It was the reason why I woke up today to talk to a following guest. He is the ambassador for the United States National High School Champions League and is the big time guest here at the, the starting 11 with Perry Vanderbeck and Kevin Whalen.
Kevin, I love
Perry.
it. Kevin,
Hey,
great to hear from you. All right. Thank you so much for that introduction. All right.
oh,
It's just,
yeah, yeah.
I know you and I have been going back and forth and trying to get this nailed down, but obviously with our schedules, today's the day. So I'm happy
Yes.
to be on, Kevin, and it's great. Always great to hear from you.
Oh, thanks, Perry. I mean, in the St. Louis area, or you may have gotten it internationally and came back. PVB, Perry Vanderbeck, baby. It that yeah it was. Is it okay to talk to you like that, or do you say, "Oh, come on, man, don't do that"?
No, Kevin, anytime, anytime. Just,
Okay.
you know,
Well,
trust me,
all right.
it's been a while.
You're the ambassador, for the high school champions league, but then you're also quasi ambassador of U.S. soccer, being right out of the high school ranks into the tying up the boots for your beloved Tampa Bay Rowdies, and so you know that I know that you know, and I want to take a personal privilege to take a moment to say, Perry, in 1980 was a moment for you and your teammates that you had to boycott the World Cup because of Russia. And I want to personally, to you, Greg, all of the St. Louis guys, and all the rest of the Americans, thank you for what you did, the sacrifices that you made. And it comes now, you're right there. You're looking right at the World Cup. The United States of America is in on our soil.
I
So,
know.
yeah, man.
Kevin, it's just, you look back 32 years ago when the first World Cup was here in 1994, and just the progress that this team, this country has made. And again, we're not where we want to be, but as I tell everybody, it's an evolution. You just have to understand that. Okay. It does take time. There's only 8 countries in the world that ever won the World Cup. And just to advance in certain stages, obviously we play in a region with CONCACAF. And between us and Mexico and Costa Rica and Honduras, those are some, obviously some Jamaica, Trinidad, some top teams in CONCACAF. And again, just, being able to get to the finals of the World Cup. You qualify first in your region and then you get to the finals. It's not easy. But in 1994, we had the advantage of not having to qualify and hosting the World Cup. And again, I was, had the advantage of going to the games and seeing, the team and obviously, the countries here and what it did for soccer in this country. Now, fast forward 32 years later, on another level, on another platform, and obviously watching the U.S. play against Paraguay the other day was something that's the best I've ever seen our national team play. It was just one of those days, and here we got a gentleman walking on the field representing the United States of America, Tim Ream, born and raised in St. Louis. And I had the honor of meeting him when the United States played against Uruguay here in a friendly in November. And obviously, you know, Tim's always been what you see is what you get. I was there the day he got drafted in MLS because I was a coach at the time, and I was speaking with his agent. And obviously, coming out of St. Louis University, homegrown, the agent was excited. And here you look at Tim's career; it's been fantastic. But my brother and I, we had the advantage to go to just witness a historical game. We just watched Cape Verde tie the number one team in the world, Spain, the World Cup favorites. So it was quite a trip up there to Atlanta. The atmosphere was fantastic, and here you are, you're witnessing a 2026 World Cup soccer game in person. You see the players coming on, and you see the national anthems, and you see, as the game goes on, poor Spanish fans, they're starting to fade a little bit because, again, obviously they dominated, but tactically, Cape Verde had to do what they did to survive. And it's just, wasn't the prettiest game. Obviously, you go to a World Cup, you want to see goals, and next thing you walk away. But it was a very historical game because they were able to do what they set out to do. And again, in soccer, obviously in the coaching side and the playing side, you got to be on the same page. And everybody was there. They got some lucky bounces. You got to have luck. All right. And they've got that. And so it was a great experience. And again, as a coach, as a former player, when people ask me about, the game itself, I always encourage them to become students of the game. You have to watch the game. We're all visual. And again, instead of telling you here, you're showing them, these are the players. Well, when Lamine Yamal comes on the field, automatically two players go in that direction. He's like a magnet because, again, that's what it takes. Danny Olmo comes on. He was the darling of the Spain team in the Euros 2 years ago. And, obviously making these substitutions, obviously the head coach didn't think that he would need to use these players, to get past Cape Verde. But again, there was a corner kick at the end. The guy had a free header. So you never know. A goal like that, could have been a big upset. So
Wow.
it was a great experience. It's something that you can look at. I'm heading out tomorrow. I'm heading to Boston because the Tartan Army has taken over Boston. And I'll be watching Morocco, who I think one is the dark horse of the tournament. I'm playing against Scotland, so I'm looking forward to that. But
Wow.
anyway, I just want to be encouraging to, all these players that, obviously, the tickets are expensive. I get that. But at the end of the day, just to watch these games. Doesn't matter who's playing because you're going to see goals. You're going to see, defenders. You're going to see goalkeepers. And at that time, that's how we learn. All right. We're all visual. So, I just can't say enough things about, it's out there. You're watching it. And Fox has done a great job of covering it. We've got some outstanding, pundits that are at the game and at halftime and explaining it, and that's how you learn. So,
Wow.
I just want to say it was a great experience, and I can't wait till see the final.
Well,
So
so that I know that my I get goosebumps every time for the pageantry for the high school champions league. You saw it down in Tampa Bay, and then you came up to St. Louis, and we seen each other after a city game at a stoplight, and you said,
yes,
"Hey, we were just talking about you," and then the next day is how St. Louis started, uh,
right,
and all that pageantry you brought the magnificence of high school soccer or soccer in general to our town. And we want to stand up and applaud you. Thank you, Perry. And can you give us a little insight on what your thoughts and your visual about the high school champions league?
I can, Kevin. And you know what? I do remember that moment walking out of St. Louis City, the game, and you and I connected right there
Yeah.
outside the stadium. And again, thank you for stopping me because at that time, obviously, we had a little conversation and, here we are today speaking, obviously, on a podcast about the Champions League. So I got involved here in Tampa as an ambassador, obviously being drafted out of high school, playing in the North American Soccer League. And again, the gentleman that was, he's still running it, Jim Hart at the time, thought it would be a great fit. So I said, Jim, what do you need me to do? He said, I need you to show up. He said, we're going to have our Champions League draw. I says, where is it? It's at Ferg Sports Bar in downtown St. Pete. Kevin, I walked into the room and like, oh my gosh, they had Tampa Bay Rowdies coach was there, a few of their players. They had some media there. They had high school coaches there. And again, it was all set up to where it's like, here, we got like an absolute, this is going to be our high school draw. They had, some boards up on the wall. So when people were selecting the teams, they obviously were pasting them up on the board, just like they do it at the World Cup. So I says, wow, I says, this is a great idea. Well, Perry, here's everything that's behind it. We've got these small schools, we've got these large schools. And again, we're trying to get to where they play each other. And again, I've never coached in high school, so I didn't know all the rules and how that can take part, but they did. And we found sponsors, and we're growing this, and we've got MVPs, and we've got scholarships. I'm like, oh my gosh! And just the first thing I thought, I've got to take this to St. Louis. So I give Greg Keller a call along with Terry Mickler and Mike Gavane and Vince Drake, my former high school coach. I says, guys, here's something that you might want to look at. course, you're going to have some questions, but, let's discuss. And they did. And I says, here, I want to put you in touch with these guys. And Kevin, I have to say this, okay? We've had the Champions League, I think we're 7 years going on 8. When this high school Champions League went to St. Louis, and the way it's grown in St. Louis because of Greg and Terry, Mike Gavane, Vince Drake, and Dave on board, all the people, I apologize if I'm leaving their names off, but all those people, this has gone onto a different level. Okay, this has been outstanding because, and again, I'm not surprised because growing up in St. Louis and what the game means to people in St. Louis, whether it be in club and high school, professional, collegiate, doesn't matter. All right. It just, the way we are, the way our culture, the way we grew up, this means a lot to everyone in St. Louis. It's followed, the people support it. And here we are, getting all this information from St. Louis. Well, we're doing this and we've got sponsors for that. And we're getting this kind of attendance. And again, you got to get gentlemen like Tim McAvoy, who comes obviously, from Select Soccer. And Tim's been in the game at CBC. He's down here at University of South Florida. Obviously, and it's in, he coaches at Scott Gallagher. Just his background. He says, guys, I want to help. I want to be part of this. And it's people like him, the coaches that I mentioned, that have taken it to another level. And again, I just, I feel proud of being from St. Louis, knowing that the impact that it's made. And now we're just growing this nationally. I'm trying to think the girl, Mrs. Harks, that, obviously was involved. And Coach Guns, people that have been on these Zoom calls, that just to communicate what's going on and what they can do and giving their ideas. And this is what has taken place. But again, I just being proud, being from St. Louis and getting St. Louis involved and watching it go to another level. I just can't say enough about it. So thank you.
I mean, we're in our 60s. I mean, we're standing up proud, chest out.
Oh, yes. So,
all right. Hey, you got a whole lazy Susan turn it, spin
yeah,
it of all kinds of other things you were involved in, of greatness.
Yeah, Kevin. Another thing I got involved in, obviously, I brought the model from St. Louis. So again, I was just I go back to St. Louis every year for the St. Louis Soccer Hall of Fame, and I'm honored to be inducted in the Hall of Fame. And again, it was my mom through her relationship with Dot Gilliam, who was Goose Gilliam's wife.
Yeah.
And they used to play on a team together back in 1950 called
Wow.
Craig Club. And it was through that relationship that Mom had always mentioned, well, there's a St. Louis Soccer Hall of Fame. And she says, you know what, maybe one day, Perry, you come back to St. Louis, when you got some time and let's go to it. And I'll never forget going there and just, watching, how everything was done and the honorees going up there and making their speeches. So I was really intrigued. And I said, Mom, this is awesome. And, fortunately, the time came when there was I think you had to be over 50 and, I was sent in my resume, my bio, and, I got selected and, I'm up there and I was, Jim Leaker being the president and coming there and taking pictures. And back that time, it was at the Millennium Hotel.
Yeah.
It was in 2011. So again, I made my speech and they said, Perry, keep it short, but I had to do a lot of thank yous because that's where I came from. And just recently in the last Hall of Fame banquet in March, I was talking to Donnie Huber. We just had this conversation, and I said, Donnie, it's one of those things where I remember where I came from, and I'll never forget it. All right, and I remember when Taylor Twin was going off a rant because I think Taylor was born in Minnesota, and then he says, you know what, I was born and raised here, and I feel the same way about St. Louis. I don't want to steal his thunder, but I'm just letting you know that I feel the same way that he does. Obviously playing in St. Louis and all the players and the coaches that I got to play with and play under, that's something that's my DNA. That's how I grew up. And there's a book that just came out called the Illustration of St. Louis Soccer. It's 150 of the top moments. And I took that book because they did the Clyde Best documentary here. And Clyde Best was a young player at 17 years old, leaving Bermuda to go play at West Ham. And again, he was the one, him and Adi Coker, that had a huge effect on the racial barrier over in the UK.
Yes.
So they did the opening of the documentary here. So the next day, him and I went to lunch with a couple other players. And I brought that book from that Dave Lang wrote. And I said, please, if there's, you have to, because he asked me about a few of the players. And I said, look, see this picture. It's 1975 St. Louis Stars. And again, without looking, I said, there's Peter Benetti, there's Dennis Burnett, there's John Hawley, there's John Sewell. Those are the 4 or 5 internationals. The rest of the players were from St. Louis.
Yeah.
And he just, and again, that's, you don't forget those things.
No, man.
I mean, just, and again, you mentioned the Olympic team. I think at that time there was 7 or 8 of us. I mean, you had Ty Keogh, Larry Hulser, Greg Villa, Billy McKeon, Timmy Clark, Bobby Bazada, David Bursick, these guys, this is the makeup of the Olympic team. And again, people always just say, St. Louis, why is it a hotbed? We used to dominate. And then obviously over the years, the population really hasn't grown. But still, you look at, the Josh Sargent, the Team Reams, we still have those players. They're coming out of one of, for me, the premier club in the country, Scott Gallagher. And again, you've got professional peoples, you got Steve Petcher and Scotty McDaniel and Stevie Trichu and all those guys, Timmy Leonard, running that club. Those guys have been there, they've done it, and that's why it has the success they have. And you have some great financial backers. I mean, you look at, Jimmy Cavanaugh, Tom Strunk, and Joe Koenig, and those guys that are behind that. That club wouldn't be where it's at. But it all started, I'll never forget, a quick story, myself and Winston DeBose, we both played on the national team with Steve Petcher. We were both in town for the St. Louis Soccer Hall of Fame, and I said, you know what, I got to take you by to see Scott Gallagher. As we walk into the lobby, there's Steve Petcher and a few of the coaches back in, that were there at the time. And again, we just started reminiscing about, obviously, being a part of the national team. And again, we played in a qualifier in 1980. 5 of us were starters from St. Louis.
Yeah.
So it's just, it's in our DNA, and again, it's something. But we all go back to, the rivalries that we had in high school soccer, because again, club soccer, as you know, it wasn't where it's at today. It was kind of the opposite. You stopped playing club, you played for high school, you had your rivalries, and then you went back to playing club. So. Be involved with the Champions League. It's an honor. I get to touch base with a lot of coaches that I've, haven't heard from in a long time. And again, they all want to jump on board because, they see the benefit and the progression of just growing the game for players that, just unfortunately, that's their level, or that's where they have to start because of the cost, that goes along with playing club soccer. But again, there's an opportunity for everybody, and that's what it creates, both boys and the girls, and that's what I'm all about. So again, it's an honor for me to be part of that, and I wear it with pride. And again, when I get to the U.S. Soccer Coaches Conventions, I try to show up for the high school events because, again, I want to be full support of that because, it helps. But one of the other things that I was talking about is the Tampa Bay Soccer. We started a Tampa Bay Soccer Hall of Fame that we modeled after the St. Louis Soccer Hall of Fame.
Nice.
And we just had our first event last August, and we had 430 people there. And it's something that, we never thought we'd get to that level the first year. But we had some fantastic inductees. And again, we've got another fantastic inductee class this year. So, the people that are helping, we're all volunteers. And, they're guys that really know the landscape here in Tampa. They've been here before I was. They've come with this, some of our board members came with the 75 Rowdies. And it was when the Rowdies came here in 75 that soccer in this community, went to another level. But just being part of that, and again, seeing what it does, and the excitement when people come to the event. And I invented Jim last year, and he says, Perry, he says, this is, for your first one, this is fantastic. But again, with our board, there's another gentleman named Fred Sikorsky. And Fred obviously went to St. Mary's, he came down here with the USF, and Fred has done a fantastic job. And between the two of us and our board, knowing how St. Louis runs there, we took that model and we ran with it. So again, kudos to St. Louis again for, coming up with the Hall of Fame, because the board always says that's kind of the mecca, the plateau that we want to be at.
Wow.
And again, we're working towards that, but it's one of those things where in St. Louis right now, that's the place to be when they announce the date. When they announce the date, soccer players, coaches, administrators, they know that's where they want to be. It's the culture. We're not there yet, but that's our goal. So,
Well, under full disclosure, Perry, would you score against Jimmy DeNoble? Is it would he stop you, or would you put it 5-0 on him or something?
No, Jimmy. No, Jimmy obviously, he's been a goalkeeper, and again, I know he was part of our first 11 induction class, and one of his claims to fame is that obviously, he scored obviously a goal as a goalkeeper. He was able to punt it into the other goal. And
Holy
again,
cow!
not many goalkeepers get that advantage. Timmy Howard did it, obviously in the ECL. And again,
Yeah,
but it's one of those
yeah.
where, yeah, again, I forget what league it was in, but yeah, he was able to do that. But Jim
Oh
has been
man.
a pioneer of soccer in Tampa, and again, he just knows the landscape. It's very important. And again, with his help in the high school champions league, his help with the Tampa Bay Soccer Hall of Fame, he had just stepped down, from a club, I think 3 or 4 years ago. But Jim is in all the circles, very well connected. So he's been a blessing, obviously, to this community for the sport of soccer.
Well, I tell you, man, this is I I got goosebumps talking to you. But I wanted to wrap it up to talk about the whole idea behind the high school soccer Champions League, the Virtuoso Award, is that you're a person does not become the best version of themselves in high school, but it is a real, it's like having the thing with the compass. It When you watch a high school player, say like a Maddie Di Maria, you
Yeah,
say, man, yeah,
yeah.
you say, man, she looked good. Well, that's how Perry Vanderbeck looked back in the day. But
I don't know about that.
boom, boom. But all the situation is that you really make your foundation. You make your reputation. I mean, Steve Petcher, he's got the thing where Normandy High School, and
Yes.
the captain, they won the state tournament, and they're never the school is never going back, man. I mean, they won the first and only time.
Right. And I remember seeing a team picture that was out on Facebook, and the comment was made that nobody believed that we would win the state championship except the players in this team. Because again, nobody really talked about it.
Yeah.
And again, you had your favorites and stuff like that. But going back to the Champions League here in Tampa Bay, Kevin, what an absolute gem of a final last year, both with the girls and the boys. When you talk about Manny Di Maria, there was a girl that I think played for Newsom High School here. They won 7-1, 7-2. She was involved in 5 of the goals.
Mm.
She scored 3 and assisted 2. I mean, she was the face of that team. But all those goals worked together. They supported one another, and it was like, and that's the reason they won. Now you go into the boys game, and you got one of the top schools here, Jesuit, is playing against Palm Harbor, and Jesuit, I think it was 2 weeks ago, had beaten Palm Harbor 5-0.
Mm.
So again, I don't make it to all the games, but I do hear the results, and sometimes I go online and I look at them. So I'm thinking, okay, this is going to be an interesting final because the head coach of Palm Harbor, he had played for the Rowdies. I signed him with the Rowdies, so I knew him and I knew what he thought about the game and stuff like that. So now you take, I don't know if you knew this, Kevin, but Palm Harbor, they've got 7 players that never stepped foot on the campus, and the
Mm.
reason they're able to do that because they're homeschooled. So when you're homeschooled,
Wow.
you can pick and choose what school you go to. So these players were
Wow.
top players at their club, Florida Premier. So again, they were playing 2 weeks prior to that in like an ECNL tournament and weren't able to play for the high school. But now that they're playing in the Champions League final, they they flew back and they made sure that they were in the final. And they go up 2-0. Jesuit comes back, ties it 2-2, and then right after that, Palm Harbor scores the winner. And I tell you
Wow.
what, both teams deserve to win. Both teams deserve to win.
Yeah.
It was that close. It was that tight. And it
Wow.
turns out that the player who got the Virtuoso Award, all right, I didn't know him personally, but I knew his father. And his father came here to play. Uh, we had a team here in MLS called the Tampa Bay Mutiny, and that started in '96. So in '95, there was a team in the USL called the Tampa Bay Cyclones, and his father played for that team. He was from Colombia. So you look at, here his dad comes to Tampa to play professionally, stays here in Tampa, coaches, and now here his son. And it was my understanding his son was spent a little bit of time down at the academy in Miami. He's a very, very good player. And now because of that, I was able to, have a conversations with some of the Rowdies coaches, and he's been training with the Rowdies reserves. They've got a team that plays in the UPSL. So again, it's one thing that leads to the other. but it's always important that, these players, that they, when they do well and they get recognized, it just goes back to, your roots of, where it started. All right. So again, playing for his club, maybe not get recognized, but all of a sudden he plays in the final for the high school Champions League, and now he's getting an opportunity with two or three other his teammates to train with the Rowdies. Because again, the head coach or one of the assistant coaches, they go to the game also because it's played at their stadium, and that's the advantage that we get down here. It's the connections that you have, that you build, and say, look, you know what, he's worth a look. You got to bring him in, and then obviously, you get the door open, and they got to take it from there. So that's why the Champions League is so important, I think, in different areas. And that's why, in talking to the team that's going to start in Dallas, I think they start next season, the gentleman, Kevin, is from CBC. Mike, can't think of his last name. Anyway, he's not in the technical side, but he's on the marketing side of the new team that plays in the USL next year in Dallas. They're going to play at the Cotton Bowl. Anyway, long story short is that, people like that, they get involved. They've already reached out before they've started to say, look,
Yeah.
we want to support the Champions League here in Dallas.
Yeah.
Right? So we're building that. And once that's built, and we want to be part of that, we can help start that.
Yeah.
We've got, we can do something like that because that's what we do. And again, those are the things that we're just, kind of touching on. We've had a very good conversation with the gentleman in Kansas City, that it's my understanding that, he's very influential up there in the high school game. Once you get that ball rolling, we'll see where that goes.
Nice.
And again, there's never guarantees. Players know that, coaches know that. So again, that you just got to open the doors and keep moving forward.
Well, okay. Oh, man. We're going to close up. This is so good. So the story goes, give me a minute, and then I'm going to flip it back to you for 2 minutes for the final 2 minutes. You got to score a goal in the final 2 minutes, and then we'll wrap it up and take it home.
So Kevin, hang on real quick. So what do I wrap? What do you mean wrap it up? I mean about the show itself. Okay, I got it.
Okay.
Get me going. Yeah.
All right. So here we are about the high school. In my day, it was watching Altros just command Captain America, the first Captain America before you, is that he just controlled the whole area. It was the first time and the only time I ever seen a player cover the entire field on both sides of the ball, and it was magic. Then it goes to Don Draghi, Double D, man. Huh?
Double D.
Yeah, and what a career he had, and then it goes down to the guy who's he owns Larry in St. Louis, Larry Hulser. And,
he does.
Yeah, and David Bursick. These players, the reason why I bring these players were absolutely unbelievable and success as high school players that easily could have went over to pro and did this and did that. And then, so now Matty Di Maria following in those footsteps. Then, but you all had down there Santiago.
Santiago?
Yeah.
Santiago didn't play for the Rowdies.
No, not for the Rowdies. Just being a high school player, that he was unbelievable.
Yes.
And he's playing in the Germany's big league.
Yes, you got that, Santi. Yeah, he is. I mean, that is, wow. I mean, thanks for bringing that up, Kevin. That's huge because, again, he got a little short stint with the Rowdies. And then, again, he got, it was through his high school and his club soccer. The next thing you know, he started, I think, in the second or third division in Germany. And it got promoted to the first division.
Yeah.
So, again, no guarantees. And, you talk about Altros. That's why I'm playing the game.
Wow.
I was very fortunate to play with the club. Before Scott Gallagher, it was Council Volkswagen. And my coaches were Rick Benben, Bobby O'Leary, Danny Gaffney. Tommy wasn't there yet. But John Schaefer coached, and he had, again, a little bit of part of this. And, again, people ask about, the success in Tampa. It was because of people like that after they got done playing, the Joey Clarks, the Ty Keoghs, the Larry Hulsers, they put back into the game. They become coaches, all right, whether it be with their kids, it doesn't matter. At the end of the day, they're doing Steve Petcher, Stevie Tritchu, those guys that have played at the highest level in this country are now putting back into the game. And that's what I think the advantage. We had that early on. I was at, 12, 13 years old, and my head coaches, Bobby O'Leary, Danny Gaffney, and Rick Bendon, that have played collegiately for some of the top teams in the country and professionally. So now, you're getting that feedback. What a great documentary. You got Tim Ream with Tommy Howe and Kevin Kalish. And he's standing in that warehouse saying, guys, thank you. Thank you for your sacrifice, for everything you did. What an honor it was for me just going to the St. Louis Soccer Hall of Fame. Charlie Clark picked me up in the car, and I thought he was lost. And we're driving down Woodson Terrace Road. I said, Charlie, where are we going? He goes, I'm going to pick up Tommy Howe. I lost my breath. I said, hang on a second. We're going to get Tommy. He goes, yeah. Knock on the door. Perry, come on in. And you could see Tommy's, it was a museum. The plaques and the jerseys and everything he had on the wall. And he says, he was so proud of it. And again, the success that he had and what he's done for all these players over the years. Every time I come to a St. Louis Soccer Hall of Fame, most of the inductees get up there and I want to thank my coaches, Tommy Howe, Dave Berwin, Dan Gaffney, Joe Owig. I mean, it just, the list goes on. And you think, where we're at today is because of that. All right. It doesn't take a genius to figure that out. All right. People, I've always been say, try to put back into the game what you've gotten out of it. And again, in order to do that, obviously that's why I haven't stepped out because, be involved with the Walt Chiswitz Foundation, where we give scholarships to coaches and we honor coaches at the St. Louis, at the U.S. Soccer Coaches Convention. I'm involved in an international coaching symposium here in Florida where we bring over these international coaches, whether it be at Real Madrid or Barcelona or, some MLS teams. We had Keith Tozer. What an absolute gem. And he put on a session. I mean, I'm still talking about it today, and that was 2 years ago.
Beautiful.
Keith is where he's at because if you watch what he does and how he does it, with the futsal, all right, it's from his heart. He wears his heart on his sleeve. And I can't say enough good things about, Keith and how he's trying to grow the game. So it's in all facets, Kevin. It's in all facets. But
Yes.
again, you bring up those, the John Draghi, Al Trost, Larry Holzer, David Bursick. Yeah, there's a reason why I'm playing. It's because those guys were a couple years ahead of me, but just watching them and just seeing what they did. And again, I always said, if I wasn't playing a game, I was at one. All right. I became a student of the game early on. And then you get into, talking, because actually Don Draghi and I were roommates just last week or 2 weekends ago when in Chicago. And we obviously reminisced about him playing at CBC and him going to St. Louis University and obviously getting drafted into the NASL. And again, we just, it's always good to reminisce and bring up the good times and, where we're at today. And now we're going to watch the U.S. play against Germany, and what a game that was. So,
Oh, man.
yeah, that was a
Okay.
fantastic game. Yeah.
All right. Well, we don't have to go home, but we can't stay on this plane. So we got our parachutes on, and we're going to
Yeah.
jump out. And oh my gosh, Perry, this has been so good. So I'll upload it, download it, send it to you. Ladies and
Okay.
gentlemen, oh, oh my gosh. Okay.
Are we good?
All right. Hey, I'm back.
Okay.
Oh man, the plug came out. Sorry.
Oh.
Sorry, ladies and gentlemen, but this is going to be the wrap up of saying, ladies and gentlemen, we've been given a food for thought, a banquet, man, for our ways. And thank you, Perry. And this has been the come on, cut it out. United States National Starting 11 or thereabouts. Thank you, Perry Vanderbeck.
Well, thank you, Kevin. I really appreciate the opportunity. And again, it means a lot to me to be on your show. And again, we can continue this at another time because I love talking about the game and the people that are involved in it. So thank you. Thank you, too.
All right, then. Thank you. Bye-bye, everyone.
We good? Kev, you still there?